Level 1. The Ranger Candidate. Most soldiers who attempt Ranger School never actually earn the tab, no matter how badly they want it, or how hard they train beforehand. This is exactly how far someone actually climbs once they finally manage to do what almost everyone else who tries eventually fails to do. The brutality here was never about one single peak moment of pain. It's slow, grinding, accumulating deterioration spread across days. Weeks of caloric deficit slowly grinding your body down to almost nothing. The kind of hunger that becomes a permanent presence. Weeks of sleep debt stacking on top of that hunger until your mind itself starts failing right alongside your body. All of it engineered deliberately, specifically, to reveal who you actually are underneath everything you thought you knew about yourself. Who you actually are once your body finally stops cooperating with your intentions and your mind is the only thing left holding on. You arrive already fit, already experienced, already proven in ways that matter everywhere else, and none of that matters here. This course simply doesn't accept anyone who hasn't already built that baseline somewhere else, long before they ever showed up. Within days, you start to realize that same baseline everyone assumed was enough is barely even the actual starting point here. The calories they give you don't match what they demand back. Hunger becomes a constant hum beneath every patrol, every exercise. Sleep arrives in minutes now, not hours, fragment by fragment. By week 2, exhaustion starts blurring what's real and what isn't. Your own mind becomes something you can no longer fully trust. There's a patrol where leadership falls on you, mid-collapse, mid-fog. You have to think clearly while your body is actively failing. You watch peers around you get recycled or dropped completely. Toughness alone was never enough. Judgment under collapse was the real test. You finish, weeks lighter, hollowed out in a way that takes months to recover from. The tab they pin on you afterward doesn't feel like a prize. It feels like a receipt for something you paid for in a currency you didn't understand. Level 2. The Private First Class. You arrive at the Ranger Regiment with a tab that experienced Rangers regard, correctly, as unearned in the way that actually matters, because Ranger School proved you could survive deterioration, not that you're ready to be trusted with this unit's actual operational standards. You are given the least glamorous tasks without complaint, understanding that this is the same continuation of the same filtering logic, applied now to whether you can execute unglamorous, precise work with the exact standard this regiment expects. The senior Rangers around you move with a specific efficiency in everything: weapons maintenance, movement, communication, a standard so far above conventional army units that you spend your first month simply trying to absorb what right actually looks like. You train relentlessly, battle drills repeated until your body executes them without conscious thought, because the entire logic of this rank is building muscle memory precise enough to function correctly when a real operation gives you seconds rather than minutes to react correctly. There's an exercise where your execution falls short of the regiment's unstated standard, and the correction you receive is immediate and blunt, entirely without the ego protection other units sometimes extend to new soldiers. You absorb this without defensiveness, understanding that the bluntness itself is a form of respect, an assumption you're capable of hearing it and adjusting quickly. Trust builds through 100 small demonstrations of reliability, and you notice, gradually, that senior Rangers are including you in conversations and planning they once had entirely without you. Level 3. The Team Leader. Small unit tactical authority changes your relationship to every operation entirely, because you're no longer just executing your own piece of a mission. You're responsible for the real-time decisions of the soldiers under your direct command during the actual moments when plans meet reality. You develop a specific situational awareness that operates almost below conscious thought, reading a developing situation and adjusting your team's posture in fractional seconds, a skill built entirely from repetition under conditions where hesitation carries a cost no training range can fully simulate. Your first real deployment carries a weight that Ranger School and unit training never fully replicated, because the actual consequence ceiling simply doesn't exist in training the way it does here. There's an operation that develops complications nobody fully anticipated, and the specific composure required to adjust in real time. Trusting your team to move with you without a verbal briefing to coordinate it reveals exactly how much the trust built during your first months is actually load-bearing now. The mission concludes, and the debrief afterward is exacting in a way that has nothing to do with blame and everything to do with extracting every possible lesson regardless of outcome. You start carrying a weight between deployments that doesn't fully leave, and you notice, watching Rangers who've done this for years, that the ones who last are rarely the ones who feel nothing about it. They're the ones who've built sustainable ways of carrying what the job generates. Level 4. The squad leader. Authority over an entire squad changes the calculation of your existence, because you're now responsible for every soldier's readiness, welfare, and tactical execution, a responsibility that extends into their training and equipment in ways your previous rank never demanded. You become the person absorbing pressure from above and below simultaneously. Platoon leadership expecting consistent results, your own soldiers expecting competent leadership and genuine care in return for their trust. There's a mission where your squad's execution under pressure reveals gaps in training you hadn't caught, and the specific ownership required to address this immediately, rather than waiting for a formal after-action cycle, teaches you something about proactive leadership that no earlier rank fully demanded. You develop a specific eye for which soldiers are developing into future leaders, and which ones need a different kind of support before a problem becomes a genuine liability. There's a decision you make under real pressure, diverging from the initial plan based on your read of a rapidly developing situation, correct only in hindsight. And the specific weight of having made that call teaches you something about the actual stakes of this position that no amount of prior deployment fully prepared you for. You start understanding that leadership at this rank means your soldier's competence is now a direct reflection of decisions you make every single day, not just during operations. Level 5. The Platoon Sergeant. Senior enlisted authority over an entire platoon moves you substantially away from direct tactical execution into a position shaping training standards and the actual development of every squad leader beneath you. You become the actual bridge between the platoon's officers and its rangers, translating command intent into execution in a way that respects both mission requirements and the lived operational reality of the soldiers carrying it out. There's a training standard you push to change, based on patterns you've noticed across multiple squads that no single squad leader would have visibility into on their own, and the institutional patience required to actually shift standards teaches you something about systemic leadership that squad-level command never demanded. You start mentoring squad leaders the way senior rangers once mentored you, translating years of accumulated judgment into guidance that respects their own hard-earned experience. The specific isolation of this rank surprises you, a growing awareness that most rangers around you have known you only as an authority figure, never as the exhausted candidate you once were on a ranger school patrol years earlier. You start understanding that your actual job now is ensuring the platoon functions at this standard whether you're personally present for every decision or not. A shift from doing the work to building the system that does the work. Level 6. The First Sergeant. Top enlisted authority in an entire company carries a weight unlike anything the earlier ranks demanded, because you're now responsible for the training standards, discipline, and readiness of every soldier across multiple platoons simultaneously. You develop a specific eye for evaluating which platoon sergeants are ready for larger responsibility, and which ones need more seasoning, a judgment built from an entire career of accumulated pattern recognition. There's an institutional decision about training resource allocation that risks drifting from what operational reality actually requires, and the specific weight of advocating against pressure from company leadership, using the full authority of your position, teaches you something about the loneliness of this level of responsibility that platoon-level leadership never demanded. You become the actual backbone connecting the company's officers to its entire enlisted structure, a role the regiment's leadership depends on more heavily than outsiders typically understand. You start shaping the actual culture of the company now, standards around discipline and excellence that get absorbed by junior rangers watching how you carry yourself rather than through any formal instruction. There's a moment where you make a difficult personnel decision that costs the company short-term capability, but preserves long-term standards, and the specific maturity required to accept that trade-off becomes a marker of the judgment this rank actually demands. Level 7. The Command Sergeant Major. The top enlisted rank across the entire Ranger Regiment carries a specific weight because you now shape training standards and institutional culture for every Ranger who will serve in this regiment for years after your own tenure ends. You sit in rooms now with officers and occasionally civilian oversight whose priorities don't always align cleanly with the operational realities you've spent an entire career learning intimately, and you develop a specific advocacy capacity. Translating operational necessity into language institutional leadership can actually act on. There's a decision about selection standards or training doctrine that carries consequences extending far beyond any single unit, and the specific weight of making that call Knowing it will shape the regiment's actual capability for a generation teaches you something about this rank's isolation that no amount of prior command experience fully prepared you for. You shape the entire selection pipeline that determines who earns the tab you once earned yourself, standards built from decades of accumulated judgment now encoded into institutional practice. Somewhere on a Ranger School patrol tonight, a candidate is running on fragments of sleep, hungry, disoriented, absorbing a version of the same test you once absorbed, not knowing your name, never likely to know it, but shaped nonetheless by standards you spent the final years of your career quietly building. The regiment continues whether you're here to lead it or not, because that is the actual nature of this legacy, a standard that outlasts any single command sergeant major's tenure, that has already outlasted Rangers more decorated than you will ever become. So here is the question underneath everything this video just walked you through. Which rank are you standing in right now? Because the command sergeant major shaping this entire regiment's future today did not start there. He started hollowed out and exhausted on a Ranger School patrol, uncertain whether he'd make it to the next checkpoint, and he closed that distance one patrol, one deployment, one earned rank at a time.